Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, it looks like Israel and the U.S. have finally reached an aid deal. The Israeli PM says he won't be playing sides when it comes to the American elections, and a former NBA All-Star is set to play for the Holy Land. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. After months of negotiations, Israel and the United States have reportedly agreed on all the final details of a 10-year American defense package to Israel, and it's expected to be signed soon. The last two key sticking points are now believed to have been fully resolved on the new Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, between the two allies. Reserve IDF Brigadier General Yaakov Nagel, who's the acting head of Israel's National Security Council, is in Washington, where he reached an agreement on the outstanding issues during talks with his American counterparts. The new aid deal is set to come into effect in 2018 when the current one expires. According to local media reports, Jerusalem will not request supplemental funding for the entire decade, and during the last 5 years of the next MOU, Israel has agreed to incrementally increase the amount it spends in the United States until the entire amount of assistance is ultimately spent on the American defense market. According to the existing agreement, Israel is permitted to spend about 25% of the aid it receives outside of the United States and 13% on fuel for its aircrafts. No other recipients of U.S. aid are granted these allowances. Israel has also indicated that it will not be seeking any additional military funding for 2017. Which currently stands at $3.1 billion according to the terms of the last 10-year package. The U.S. offer that is currently on the table includes a pledge to substantially increase the aid package, which is currently worth around $30 billion, making it the largest pledge of military assistance to any country in U.S. history. Last week, the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement that the Jewish state places great value on the predictability and reliability of the military assistance it receives from the United States and on honoring bilateral agreements. Even though the United States and Israel are extremely close allies, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he has no intention of playing favorites and will welcome whoever becomes the next president. Prime Minister Netanyahu told a special briefing of Israeli diplomatic correspondents he would be happy to work with whoever is elected in November, going on to say that he's being very careful not to get involved in presidential campaigns. Despite very public disagreements between Jerusalem and Washington during the two-term administration of U.S. President Barack Obama, the Israeli leader is insisting that he remains neutral over the outcome of this year's race for the White House. During the last election cycle in the summer of 2012, Netanyahu gave a warm welcome to visiting Republican candidate Mitt Romney, just as he did with Obama during his own visit to Israel when he was first running for office back in 2008. Netanyahu stressed it's critical to continue cultivating Israel's relationship with its most important ally, so he always makes time to greet every elected American official who comes to Israel. The Israeli leader is next scheduled to go to the U.S. in September to attend the United Nations General Assembly. And as of yet, there are no plans for a bilateral summit with Obama. Meanwhile, when it comes to the political landscape here in Israel, the Prime Minister is telling the press that even though there are no current negotiations with opposition parties, he's still willing to broaden his coalition. For now, Netanyahu intends to retain the foreign affairs portfolio for himself, to use as a potential bargaining chip if talks toward the formation of a unity government are to resume. Opposition leader Isaac Herzog is rejecting the Prime Minister's offer to join the right-wing governing coalition, claiming that a unity government is no longer possible. Over the past year, the world has seen the growing power of right-wing political movements in Europe. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with Holocaust expert Efraim Zuraf to talk about whether or not the new right-wing leadership is actually distancing itself from anti-Semitism.
We're seeing a rise in some right-wing governments in different countries around Europe these days. Is it being accompanied by Holocaust denial, or is this a new kind of right-wing extremists?
Okay, first of all, you have to understand that in post-communist Eastern Europe, this Holocaust distortion, okay, is accepted by all governments. Not only right-wing governments. In other words, this is something that the governments are doing. They're pouring millions into convincing the world that they didn't do it and that they suffered just as much as the Jews, if perhaps not even more, because communism lasted longer. So that's one thing. Now, the other phenomenon is a very interesting phenomenon because the roots of those right-wing parties are fascist and were anti-Semitic. But today, we don't see that anti-Semitism. And several of those parties are really making a special effort to distance themselves from anti-Semitism. A classic example is, of course, Marine Le Pen, who fired her father, got rid of him, and it distances herself from all anti-Semitism. Of course, there are people in that party who are problematic. But she herself and the leadership of the party has been trying to court the Jewish community, and in a certain sense there is a mutual interest because her animus is directed at the Muslims and the wave of immigration that France might have to accept. Some has already accepted some of which. And Austria, Strache, same issue.
So what would be your advice with the leader of Austria, maybe the president that's still in dispute, Marie Le Pen, if they approach the Jewish people in a way that makes it clear that they denounce everything about what took place during the Holocaust, they are not anti-Semites, they are even pro-Israel, would you accept them? Would you advise that?
I'll tell you what my late uncle, Dr. Eli Saar, used to say to me, Kabdeo v'chashdeo. In other words, we have to speak to these people. And I think in that context, I'll tell you an interesting story. In 1995, I was invited to meet with the head of the neo-fascist party in Italy, Gianfranco Fini, who I was told wanted to take his party away from fascism and move them towards the political center. In other words, to be like the Likud, there was a moderate right-wing party. So first of all, I said I'm only willing to meet with him if it's not publicized, okay? And we met. And I was actually very favorably impressed by him, and I gave him a list of things that he has to do. And I can tell you that within 2 years, he did every single one of the things that I asked him to do, with one exception. I told him that he has to have a commission of inquiry to examine the role of Italians in the deportation of more than 8,000 Jews from Italy to Auschwitz. It's the only thing he did. He went to Auschwitz. He denounced fascism, he denounced anti-Semitism, and the truth of the matter was he became the leader of a moderate party. It was very pro-Israel and a great friend of the Jewish people and of Israel. So in other words, it is possible, but it doesn't mean that it's happening everywhere.
Ephraim Zuroff, thank you so much for being with us at ILTV.
My pleasure.
The Druze Arabs make up only 2% of Israel's population, but unlike most other Arab minorities in the Jewish state, the special group serves in the Israeli military. Now, for the first time in history, a Druze member has been named as the most senior medical official in the Israeli army. The Israeli army has just announced that Dr. Badal Tarif has been named IDF Chief Medical Officer. The appointment marks the first time the post will be filled by a member of Israel's Druze Arab minority. As a colonel, Tarif served as a deputy surgeon general of the IDF and will now be promoted to brigadier general when beginning his new position. His past service also includes leading Israeli army efforts to treat Syrians wounded in their civil war who make their way to the two nations' shared border for help. Dr. Tarif even headed Israel's emergency rescue and aid efforts in Nepal after the devastating 2015 earthquake. There are only 140,000 Druze living in the Jewish state, but the Druze play a proud role in Israeli society. Israeli Druze serve in the army and perform national service with pride, with many rising through the ranks to become professional military officers. There are many other senior Druze officers currently in the army, including Colonel Ghassan Elian, who commands the Golani Infantry Brigade. Former Lieutenant Colonel and Israeli Druze Majali Wahabi also went on to become a politician after leaving the army, and became Israel's first Druze acting head of state in February of 2007, while both the president and interim president were abroad. ILTV often reports about incidents of anti-Israel bias around the world, so it may be surprising to find that some of these incidents even take place within the Jewish state. Joining us today in the studio is Eitan Meir to tell us about how his organization Im Tirtzu is combating internal BDS. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So to begin, tell us about the Im Tirtzu movement.
Okay, so I'll give a short background. Im Tirtzu is an extra-parliamentary organization. It was founded in 2006, and its main goals are to strengthen and advance the values of Zionism in Israel. Now, since then, it has evolved into the largest Zionist movement in Israel with 6,000 members, and we have activist branches at 15 universities and colleges throughout the country. Now, what we say in Im Tirtzu is that there's two aspects to the movement. One is to do good, and the second is to do bad. When we say do good, we mean through volunteer work through the community, whether it's volunteering with Holocaust survivors at hospitals, trying to integrate minorities into the Israeli society, and as well as on campuses, we run a lot of activities, whether it be Zionist lectures and other Zionist programs. And when we talk about doing bad, we talk about really combating, like you mentioned earlier, the anti-Israel phenomenon within Israel. Now, most people abroad are very familiar with the BDS movement. They're familiar with all the different things all the different Israel hatred that is rampant throughout the world, but they're not really familiar with what goes on here. In the academia, in the media, in the culture, and especially in the civil society, there is a large anti-Israel phenomenon that is really taking the country by storm. If we want to focus on the civil society, we have the non-governmental organizations. Now, we have a lot of non-governmental organizations that get funding from political entities and foreign governments, such as you could basically take a handpick of all of the European states, and they'll basically be on the list. And they get millions and millions of dollars in order to undermine the Israeli democracy and to defame and delegitimize the IDF soldiers as well as the state of Israel. And it's a large portion of Im Tirtzu activities is devoted to that.
So can you give us some kind of concrete examples of this internal BDS that you're talking about and how Im Tirtzu has been involved in combating that?
Of course. I think it was a couple of months ago, there was a really large vote held by the American Anthropological Association, the AAA as they call it. And the vote was whether or not to boycott Israel, to impose an academic boycott on Israel. So what Im Tirtzu found out was that there are actually dozens of Israeli academics that sent letters to the AAA, to the American Association, urging them to boycott Israel. They're basically saying, boycott me. Even though they work in Israeli institutions, they want to impose a boycott on themselves. And what we basically do is a lot of research, and we expose this phenomenon, and we go to the media, and we say, look, this is what's going on. This is insane. You have to do something about it. And then what happens is we make a lot of waves. We get the people behind us because we draw our support from the people. We are a grassroots movement. And then what happens is it gives the legislators the ability to act. After our report, there was an emergency session in the Knesset that talked about the politicization, the problems with politicization, and this problem in general of the anti-Israel organizations and academics. And through all of this, we are able to enact legislation such as the transparency law that was recently passed in Israel.
That's what I actually want to ask you about. So this bill, or now law, has just been enacted, and it's been very controversial, made big waves. Can you tell us about how your organization has been involved in getting that passed and what it's going to mean for the future of Israel?
Sure. So basically, we came out with a large campaign in the end of 2015. We called it the Foreign Agent Campaign. What we basically did was we surveyed 20 non-governmental organizations that receive a large portion or the majority of their funding from foreign governments, like I stated earlier, and we went through all their activities, all their sayings, what they said, what they do, and how they influence Israeli society. And what we found out is that these organizations are directly promoting an agenda of delegitimization of the country. And what we advocate for is, like the law says, transparency. We want the people of Israel to know who's pulling the strings behind these organizations. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to tell someone you can't get money from someone else. We don't want to shut anyone up, and they're free to do whatever they want. But we want the Israeli people to understand who's actually doing this, that it's not, B'Tselem, and it's not Shovim Shtika, Breaking the Silence, and it's not Yesh Din, but it's Holland, it's Denmark, and it's Germany, France, England even. You name it, and they're there. So it's very important for us that the people understand who's doing this.
Now, Im Tirtzu has a rather controversial reputation among a lot of left-wing parties, especially for pushing right-wing agendas. But why is that the case? I mean, why has your organization gotten so much negative feedback?
That's a good question. Well, we don't view this as right-wing at all. We view what we do as patriotism, as Zionism. The unfortunate fact is that if you're willing to speak out against an organization that defames the IDF regularly, and I'm not talking about trying to better the army as a whole. I'm talking about slandering the IDF and making up things that don't happen.
You're referring to breaking the silence.
Of course, breaking the silence, because it's the easiest example for people to understand. And when we say that, listen, what you're doing is wrong, what you're doing is bad, you have no legitimacy in Israel, you're getting money from foreign governments in order to do this, people get angry. People on the radical left get angry at us because, of course, they rather that we don't say it. They rather that we don't bring up the fact that they're getting all this money from foreign governments and that they continue to do their activities without anyone saying anything.
Why are we seeing anti-Israel bias within the country? I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon. You're talking about this and you're combating it, but why does it exist in the first place?
So there's many different theories to why it exists. The first theory is simply follow the money. If you look at the amounts of money that these people are getting, you could easily make the assumption that, okay, the more slander that I bring against Israel, the more money that I get. For example, that during the past Operation Protective Edge, this Palestinian Foundation in Ramallah, they promised, breaking the silence, to give them a grant if they bring a certain amount of testimonies against the IDF. I can't remember the exact number. I think they may have wanted 10 testimonies, and breaking the silence brought 60. Pro bono, just take an extra 50. So these organizations are getting money. So why would they stop if this is what they're getting?
Okay. Well, finally, I understand that you are about to head to a conference, which means you have to leave very soon,
Right.
that is being held by your organization. Tell us about that.
So the conference is the annual conference that we hold at Im Tirtzu. It's an opportunity to bring all of our activists and our supporters together. We have our farthest branches up north in Tel Chai, and all the way down south we have branches in Beersheba and in Sapir College. So it's a good opportunity for everyone to get together, to talk to each other, for our supporters to come and see who they're supporting. And we're having Moshe Aaron speak. He was the former Minister of Defense and the former Minister of Foreign Affairs. And it's just great. We have a whole list of great speakers. Just Zionists, a place for them to mingle and to get to know each other and to be proud of living in Israel and being Zionist.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Israeli basketball fans may be able to start celebrating because former NBA star Amari Stoudemire has reportedly agreed to play for Hapoel Jerusalem. The 33-year-old All-Star may have just retired from the NBA in the United States, but it looks like he's just about to begin a whole new career in Israel. Stoudemire announced his retirement on July 26 after playing in the NBA for 14 years, and Israeli media almost immediately started buzzing with hope that he would come to play for Israel. Today, the former NBA star is set to hold a press conference in Tel Aviv to make the official announcement that he'll be joining Hapoel Jerusalem. The Jerusalem-based team won the Israeli championship last year for the first time in its history, and will play in the Eurocup this year. In July of 2013, Stoudemire announced that he had become part owner of the team. Although Stoudemire isn't technically Jewish, the basketball star considers himself culturally Jewish and has a deep affection for Israel. He's long believed he has Hebrew roots and has visited Israel several times. In 2013, Stoudemire even came to the Holy Land as an assistant coach for Canada's basketball team in the Maccabi Games, where he met with Israeli President Shimon Peres. Stoudemire is a six-time NBA All-Star and had career averages of 18.9 points and 7.8 rebounds per game. If he comes and plays for Hapoel Jerusalem, he will be one of the biggest American basketball stars to ever play for Israel. You may not know it, but up to 40% of people in the United States live with the symptoms of an overactive bladder. This often stressful condition can be difficult to treat and even harder to talk about, but now a new Israeli company may offer a groundbreaking treatment. Joining us today in the studio is Avner Geva, the CEO of Vensica Medical. Thanks for coming in.
Sure.
I'm hoping I pronounced the company name correctly.
You did.
I did? Okay, I'm proud of myself. So let's start out, with talking about this disease. What is overactive bladder syndrome? I understand it's not something that people are as open about, but it is a very common issue.
Right, it is very common. So the statistics say, as you said, 40% of Americans suffer from this syndrome. And basically what it involves is a high frequency, so going to the restrooms even 3 times an hour. A lot of time it's associated with the urgency, so the need to go right here, right now. But the worst symptom is losing control over the bladder, so just urine leaks, which is the worst symptoms that you don't want to have. And at this stage, usually the patients want to go and get treatment and discuss this with their physician.
And so I was actually reading about this online, and it says that 30% of men in the United States face symptoms of, it's overactive bladder syndrome, OBS?
OAB.
OAB, there you go.
Right.
And 40% of women face this issue, so it's a very big percentage.
Right.
Now, tell us about this product that you have created.
Right, so today the first line of treatment is usually oral medications where the patient swallows every day a pill, but more than 50% of the patients will fail oral medications because it has a very bad side effects. So really bad feelings associated with taking the drug during the day, nausea and sleepiness and some other bad feelings. And then the next line of treatment would be a very invasive treatment where a cystoscope and a needle are inserted into the bladder. And a drug is injected into the bladder wall at 30 different sites. So, and this drug is
That
Botox.
sounds painful.
It is very painful, as you can imagine. This drug is called Botox. It's actually the same drug used for aesthetics. And as you can imagine, it's a very invasive procedure, very painful. It's associated with risks that are the results of needle pricks. Blood and pain and 25% of infection rates as a result of this procedure.
But this is not the product that you guys are offering, right? You've created something else.
Right, so this is the standard of care. This is what's done today. And we have a special catheter that is made out of silicone. So it's really a silicone tube. Today, even the person can insert this tube to himself or even by a nurse. So it's very, very easy. And the unique things about our device is that it doesn't involve needle pricks. So the catheter has an ultrasound transducer on the distal tip of the catheter that applies ultrasound to the bladder wall. And this is very different ultrasound than the one you know. It's not imaging ultrasound, it's for therapeutic purposes. And this ultrasound opens small pores in the bladder, and at the same time it pushes the Botox through these pores and deep into the bladder wall. So here we have a device with no needles, so pain-free or minimal pain. There's no need for any form of anesthesia. So in today's treatment, you must be sedated or be under some local anesthesia.
Right,
With this device, you don't have there's no need for anesthesia. Also, we reduce infection rate, no blood, no pain, and in general, we improve patient experience by a lot.
So that's amazing. Is this product available yet? Where can you get it if you want to get it?
Right. So we are expecting to commercialize the product in Europe by early 2019. And to take it in the US probably by early 2021.
Wow, okay,
Right.
but you guys are on the right path, so this is a really big deal. Now, I understand that there's a bigger business potential behind the product that you've created because it can actually treat more than just this disease.
Right. So actually our company started on chemotherapy delivery to the bladder wall for the treatment of bladder cancer, which is actually, again, sadly enough, it's a huge market. It's the fifth most common type of cancer. And also it's the type of cancer with the highest recurrence rates. So it's like a chronic disease. And again, here our device improves the delivery of the chemotherapy, which today very inefficiently being delivered to the bladder wall. So again, there's huge opportunities because there are big pharma companies that manufacture those drugs, and they're very interested in our device. And we're having discussions with those companies for collaboration to develop our device for their purposes.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Well, this is something that I've never heard of before, and it sounds great. And I'm very much hoping that it will be on the market by your projected date.
It's important to stress that the Israeli government is funding this project alongside the private investors. But it's a big thing that the Israeli government puts a lot of money into this company. So
yeah, and Israel, we're seeing this on a daily basis, is coming up with new medical technology that's changing the world. You're not the first company to come in with such an amazing product, but this sounds very special and important for our future. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Thanks.
All right, guys, a heartwarming story has just gone viral and we have to share it. Yesterday afternoon, Muslim American Lina Al-Arian says she was approached by a 90-year-old Jewish man named Lenny at a Barnes & Noble in Boston. Al-Arian had taken her 2 young daughters to the bookstore for a special children's program when Lenny walked over to her with tears in his eyes and apologized for the general anti-Muslim sentiment in the world today. Lenny told her that as a Jewish man who grew up with parents who didn't speak any English, he remembers what it was like to be discriminated against and rejected, and that he feels awful about the bigotry Lina's children might one day face. But that's not all. After his heartfelt apology, Lenny even bought each of Al-Aryan's daughters a present in honor of his 90th birthday. Al-Aryan says she was blown away by his kindness and asked if she could give him a hug. Since she's posted the story online, thousands of people have liked and shared her post. And here at ILTV, we're sending our love out to Lenny for helping spread love and understanding. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Israelis like to view their nation as one big community, so today's word is kehila, or community in Hebrew. Israel is a melting pot of different cultures, ethnicities, and even religions. Jews from all over the world move to Israel on a yearly basis, but the Jewish state is also home to many non-Jewish residents from across the globe. All of these unique identities contribute to a diverse Israeli kehila. Just try walking through Tel Aviv. Sometimes it feels like you're going on an international journey as you make your way from neighborhood to neighborhood. Kehila is a foundation of Israeli society because the only way to expand your knowledge is to expand your community. After all, as they say, united we stand, divided we fall. On that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tuesday is expected to be partly cloudy with a high of 90 degrees. The temperature should drop down to 88 by Wednesday, but the sun will be back out and strong. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.81 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our next update at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.